Ladies and gentlemen, guys and girls, welcome to the first episode of the Age of Warfare podcast of 2025. Yes, this is the first episode of the year. And before we get started, I just want to wish everyone a happy new year. I hope you guys enjoy your celebration, praying for a great new year, a great 2025. And for today's episode of the first episode of 2025, we're going to be talking about the Kingdom of Prussia. Yes, really interesting subject, and we'll get into how I bumped into the Kingdom of Prussia in a moment. But as always, Aiden, how you doing today, my brother?
I actually had a really nice day. So I just went down, did a bit of wandering around, went to a bookshop as well. They've changed it all around. I didn't like it. I left because the books were in the wrong places. But it was a bookshop. And yeah, it's like apart from them moving the bookshop around, I've had a very nice day actually, and it's all gone how I wanted it to, which is a new thing for me. So new things for 2025. Days going how I want them to. So.
Yep. As for me, I took 2 weeks off for Christmas and New Year. I will be going back to work on Monday, going back to work on my books. So that should be interesting when I get back to work. I know I'm dying to get back to finishing up my current projects and all that. And I got plenty planned for 2025. So it should be another wonderful, great year. All right, so now that we got 2025 out of the way, I hope you guys all had a wonderful, way to wing a new year. Okay, so the subject at hand, the Kingdom of Prussia. So the Kingdom of Prussia, not to be confused with Russia, the Kingdom of Prussia was a Germanic state, and it really became a power in the Napoleonic era, which ironically you have a book showing about the Napoleonic era. Please show it to us.
One of my many books on this.
There you go. Armies of the Napoleonic era. Yeah, so that's.
The guy's name's a screen name. Put it that way. Yeah. But it's apt. It's apt for what it is as well. So, initially talking about the Napoleonic era. How did you come across the Napoleonic era, Angel? Well, I'd like to ask this. So I know how I came across, and I'll describe it in a second. But how did you come across this?
That's a really good way to start, actually. Yes, we're going. This is why I like this show so much, because I get to talk about one of my favorite underappreciated games, Cossacks. Yes, that was my first bump into Cossacks, into Prussia. And what I like about Cossacks, as you may well know, we played it many times, is that it has an encyclopedia where you can look up the different units, the different nations and all that. It's not just playing the game. You get to learn about Prussia. And, Prussia is basically, but Prussia in the original Cossacks, the technology tree was vanilla. Was actually really vanilla. They didn't have any special units and all that. It was just the basic units you can hire. Although in Cossacks 3, the 18th century musketeer is a specialized Prussian musketeer, and it has its own Prussian, authentic Prussian clothing. Have you ever seen a musketeer for Prussia, and how they look? I'll see if I find a picture of it so you can get get an idea how they look.
I believe it's page 196 in this book. So I'm not just stupidly clever. I looked it up before the show.
Yep.
See if I can get to my page before you can get to your picture.
Yeah. But I think I got something.
There we are. Aha! So.
All right, let's see yours. That's exactly. Yep. That's for the Prussian uniforms, and really credit to Cossack. And here's the one I found. And I mean credit to the developer of the game for putting in the that particular skin in Cossacks 3 because really
Yeah.
it gets Prussia is its charm, and I might point as Prussia in Cossacks 3, not so much Cossacks 1, but 3. Yeah, and these guys have pretty good stats in the game. I know I'm getting technical for those who might not be too involved with video games, but yeah, that was my first bump into Russia and Prussia, and I kind of learned later on Prussia was actually a German state center on the North European plain that started in 1525, and it used to belong to part of the Teutonic Order. Yeah. So yeah. Mhm.
This goes deep into a bit of history. So when people talk about like this, is going to seem like a tangent at
Yeah.
first. So when people talk about the Crusades, they often think Middle East because that's where the majority of them were for most
Right.
people that we see about. You then have the Reconquista of Spain, so you have some knightly orders there. But what people often forget about is the Baltic Crusades and the
Yes.
crusades of those knights through Russia. So you have the Hospitallers, which is a subject we will be coming to in a future episode.
Hmm.
But the Hospitallers are actually connected to the Cossacks, and some of the Cossack stuff with
Yeah.
Hospitallers is really connected, which is really an interesting thing. But it shows what they were doing in that area. So there was, as we know at the time, a crusade was bringing Christianity to other people, and if they didn't believe in it, you stabbed them. That's basically how. That's basically how a lot of those crusades worked. You can't get away from that.
Hmm.
So um, you ended up with these knightly orders that came out of that. There's some absolutely beautiful brick castles that were built by some of these orders in Poland. Still has quite a lot of them as well. But going all up that border between Poland and Belarus is one of the
Hmm.
prominent places, but
Right.
also into this area as Prussia. Now, Prussia is not a country that exists anymore. They're like
Right. Yeah.
Prussia
Yeah. Hmm.
is, but weirdly, it does exist. It's called Germany.
Germany. Right. Hmm.
Prussia took over Germany because of how everything connected together, and then in the treaties after World War One, that the areas got taken away from them. You had the corridor that went up that caused issues of World War Two. It was in that we need to take this back. You've also got the Kaliningrad Oblast of Russia that's up there.
Hmm.
That's that connected area. So
Right.
it's that little bit there. But as you said, what was the use? It was 15 something
25.
that, yeah. So this comes after a lot of European wars. And as capitalism is starting to get started as well, it's when communication, science, technology is really starting to come out of that medieval era.
Hmm.
How this happened, and that era of Europe, from sort of think Denmark to essentially Russia, is completely in turmoil for so
Right.
much of this period. You've got 7 years war, you've got 30 years war, you've got all of that. You've got the Swedish coming in and inventing a goddamn cavalry charge
Oh, and
with
I'm
Gustavus
sorry.
Adolphus. Like,
I'm
there's
sorry to
so
cut
much.
you off, Aiden. There was something called the Kamar Union during the Baltic Crusades as well. The Kamar Union with Denmark and Norway and parts of they had that new union.
Yeah, it's
Hmm.
after the Vikings have been Christianized.
Right.
Well, they've got to go somewhere, and you're not going to leave that ability for combat
Uh-huh.
lying around if you're going to go on a crusade. So that all gets brought. It's like it's such a big connection that people
Yeah.
forget
Hmm.
about of how and why the eastern Russia. So Europe extends to the Ural Mountains. Like that western part of Russia, where most of the Russians live, it
Hmm.
is Europe. Is a lot of people don't like to consider Russia Europe. Well, they're wrong. You can tell them they're wrong. It
Yeah.
is whether we like it or not.
It
Um,
is Europe.
it's part of that great expanse. but it's so flat in
Right.
so many of those areas. This is why we go back to our thing that we love to talk about, horse archers. This is why a lot of the horse archers had such a great time over
Yeah,
there.
right.
So you end up developing these different kingdoms, but they're all very nation kingdoms. They're very sort of early and small, easy to take over in the sense of they're not so established. You think of trying to overthrow a government such as like ours in the UK or the US or something. It's that would change the world so fundamentally. It will be so difficult to do. Yeah, these are like the US in like 1778. You try and change the government, then
Yeah.
people turn around and go, well, it's only been 2 years, whatever. Or changing up our stuff in what 1068, and they're going, well, we've only just been invaded, so yeah, new guy, whatever. It's that type of time period that we're looking at here, where Prussia starts to grow as an entity, but it's not really a thing, as you said, until the 1500s.
Yeah.
This is all to do with trade, and this is the Hanseatic League is what really is the genesis of all of this, of how that southern Baltic region, Baltic, I always get those two mixed up, but that southern region, so the northern coast of Europe, where you've got Denmark comes down, north of Germany, goes across, you've got a little bit of Poland, and then you've got this other little bit. So what is this other little bit that is now? Is it Poland? Is it not? That's Prussia. That is Prussia, and where it came from. That influenced so much of our history is absolutely insane. But it's kind of like Poland, where Poland kind of disappears and then expands again, and then disappears and expands again. But it's always, there's been this core of the people knew they were. Therefore, that's why it was able to do that thing.
That and south of Prussia, you had Saxony, the Kingdom of Saxony, another German kingdom in the Napoleonic era. Saxony.
White uniforms in Saxony. So Prussia. Which brings me on to a very important point. So dark blue in oil painting. So you have different color paints.
Prussian blue.
Prussian blue. It's called Prussian blue because it is Prussian blue. That's the color of their uniforms. It's had that much impact on the world that we know dark blue as Prussian blue.
And I believe that was the coat of arms of Prussia. That was the main color of the uniform.
Yep. Yeah, and that is it's those little bits, it's those things that we like about history. When we do this is those little bits of history that come out and you're like, well, where did that come from?
Right, exactly.
Well, now you know where it came from. That is linked to there.
And like I said, Cossacks, I mean, especially Cossacks 3, it does a wonderful job showing off the history. I mean, it's an underappreciated game that I feel just doesn't get enough attention, man. But it's a really good game if you want to know about the Napoleonic era, especially the campaigns of Cossacks. And it's I think I told you this. It was developed by a Ukrainian developer.
It's why we don't have a further one after they redeveloped number 1 into number 3 and put that out, which obviously we've both downloaded and played to death.
Yeah, and then Cossacks 2 was the stepchild of Cossacks 2. But to me, I play Cossacks 2, and even though Cossacks 3 is a way better game, let's face it, but Cossacks 2 kind of captured the Napoleonic era actually better, believe it or not.
It's the essence, the sprites as well, their uniforms in there, the actual detail they put into those uniforms is absolutely fantastic. Often Napoleonic era stuff I tend to from wargaming, so this will get into how I know about Prussia. So it's historical wargaming. I tend to have gone for Russia in a lot of these things. I do it on computer games. Hearts of Iron often play Russia. Gives you a lot to play with. That I've got in miniature armies. I
Right.
have World War II Russians. I have Napoleonic Russians. I
Uh-huh.
have, to be honest, you could argue some of my stuff is World War I Russians. So I've got a whole gamut of this stuff for Space Russia because I just find it quite fascinating. So I get that whole historical wargaming thing from my dad. Now my dad was also
Right.
a wargamer his nation that he really liked was Prussia. So it was Prussia and
Right.
then into Germany. So that book that I showed you, that was his. That book is older than me. That book came out in. Let me find the date. It was 70 something, if I remember rightly. It's it's published in Devon. It's a weird place to publish things. It's 79. Right. So my dad was looking into this stuff in the 70s. My dad was a bit of a history buff. Is essentially, if you imagine Angel old enough to be my dad, did the Angel's my dad, and then that's that. Yeah, that's it. But my dad was into Prussia. He painted a 15 millimeter, so it's 15 millimeters to 6 foot, being British, I mix scales, to a 6 foot human. So think how tiny those are. And he was painting all those uniforms and all those buttons correctly on them. He actually looked up that. So I had all of those resources. That was one of my first big influences on this. Hence why Prussia is a big influence of one of those things that he looked at. And this is, like Angel said, it's like those formative games, those games that you get that obsession about, like, this is amazing, and it's got all of this stuff. Because Cossacks was realistically, from that historical side, Age of Empires 2, but the later years, when it came to the background history. But it came to the background history side of things.
Right.
They did the same thing as Age of Empires did, which is what got a lot of people into this stuff as well. That's starting to get into tangents as well. So let's get back. Yep.
Well, before we move on, I wanted to share. This is the flag of Prussia. That was the flag of Prussia, back then. And as you can see, you can see it. It has some Teutonic influence. Like you see this the cup on the right hand side with the cross. It has some Teutonic influence.
It's an orb. It's a symbol of state. So if you ever watched the crowning of our king, you'll see you have the scepter and the orb, and they're symbols of state. There's a lot of meaning that goes around them as well. It's why if you ever drink Chambord, it's why it was originally in those, because and it looked really cool. I never bought a bottle of Chambord while it was in there. I just wanted to buy one and then just paint the bottle. So I didn't want the alcohol inside, but
yeah,
cool. It's right. As you say, it has these links. Yeah.
But and here's the other thing. I was playing Age of Empires 3 back in the day. When you pick Germany, it's considered Prussia, but it's kind of confusing because you had different parts of Germany. You had Prussia, you had Saxony, and you had Bavaria.
Bavaria.
Bavaria, excuse me, Bavaria. So to lump them all into Germany is kind of wrong because Germany was kind of split into those three distinct, nations.
So I'm just. Why am I typing in German? I did that. My German teacher would slap me for spelling like that. So I'm just looking up a few German flags that I know about, and
Right.
all right, here we are.
Okay.
So, all right, let's see if I can actually share my screen.
All right. Yeah. Go for it.
Right, so let's start with this one. So this is just a general Google search, but
Okay.
notice what's in the middle. That's Brandenburg. That's a German state, right? So we get rid of that, and then we have a look at this. Oh no! If you have pressed the right buttons,
Yeah.
we
Plus,
can
yeah.
do this.
Make sure everybody can see it.
So, how familiar
All
does
right.
that
It's coming.
look?
Oh, here we go. Of
It's
the Holy
the
Roman
same.
Empire.
It's the Holy Roman Empire.
Yeah. How you like
Why
that,
would
right?
they be so similar? Yeah, and this is the thing. As everyone says, the Holy Roman Empire is a precursor to Germany. It kind of is. It is not the antecedent to the Roman Empire because, quite frankly,
Right.
that's a long story for another podcast.
Yeah. That's a whole other.
That's a very long story. But essentially, you can see this influence here of this symbol, and it goes through. You can even go down into places like Croatia,
Right.
various places like that. A lot of them connected to the Holy Roman Empire. This idea of an eagle or double eagle, this idea of a large authoritarian, really nice uniform empire with a double-headed eagle. Anyone ever looked at Warhammer 40k? Its symbol is a double-headed eagle with guys who have really nice uniforms. That's a kind of cultural influence, don't you think? That's gone into a popular war game here. So this is that whole idea of that from that flag is we still see it today in states flags as well. Oh, Lee's arrived.
Hey, me, what's going on?
Yeah. Oh, Angel, I referenced you as my father. That means apparently Lee's the grandfather.
Right.
But yeah, it's the Prussian influence on stuff. So one of the big things I've been skipping around is World War II. All right, Germans. World War II. Have a look at. Before we even do that, actually, before we do that, let's do the Napoleonic Prussians. Like they turned up, Battle of Waterloo. That's why Waterloo was won.
Right.
However, when they attacked at Waterloo, they ended up shooting. I think it was the Silesians, or was it the Brunswickers? It may have been the Brunswickers. There was a whole uniform confusion. Napoleonic era, lots of smoke and stuff like that. They initially attacked the wrong side, but then they came in. Everything was won. But the uniform of the Landwehr, the Land Army, is like essentially a citizen army. That becomes a big thing in Germany as well. So Prussia expands. Prussia takes over Germany from a higher level. So it doesn't like invade and take over like say 1066. Bunch of guys come over, swords and stuff, kill a bunch of guys, and they go, "Yay, we now own this place." It's the politics and the aristocracy and the marrying in, and then it slowly becomes a thing. It's more like say. Hollywood is a good example of this, actually. It's a cultural thing of it's not intentionally going out and invading other countries, but the ideas, concepts, films, and everything like that influence other countries. And it's a well-known name that you get to the extent of India has Bollywood, which is a takeoff of that name, even though they've got their own film industry. They're referencing that original name because you have this massive influence. So Prussia has this massive influence from, if we go slightly further back from, as you said at the start, we've got the Orders of Knights. You've got the Teutonic
Right.
Order coming
The
in here.
Teutonic Order, right. And
So,
don't forget who the Teutonic Order was fighting, Lithuania.
yes. So Lithuania was
Right.
Lithuania and Poland for a very long time.
Right.
And they were fighting the Wends for quite a lot of their time as well. And this is those castles I referenced earlier. That's this bit. So what you're looking at with the Teutonic Order, they're what black with white crosses, a bit like the Hospitallers, but slightly different. I think is their thing. Well, it's like, let's not get into the head of Knights Hospitallers for 5 years before our Queen died, because she was the head of a knightly order. The Knights of St. John Hospitallers is their real name, but it's St. John's Ambulances for the bar ambulance services in the UK. They do charity work and everything, and the Queen was the head of that. So yes, our Queen was the head of a knightly order, which is pretty damned cool. But that's what you get when you're a knight. So anyway, go back to these Teutonic orders.
Right.
People often reference the Germans, they're the Teutons, and things like that. You think of some of the propaganda from the First World War as like, you think of the Huns, like we talked about this before, bunch of horse archers coming in. You reference to the Huns because the Huns were seen as barbaric because of the head strapping thing. They look weird. Weird people, clearly not us. That was the basic logic of it. So you reference the worst thing, but it's the Teutonic masses coming forward. It's a bit rich coming from us in the UK, considering we are basically Germans. And like, our country's literally named after a place in Germany. Like, I'm done. Previous podcast, actually, not a further podcast, that's a previous podcast. But you have this Teutonic order that's doing all these things. It's bringing that. So each country has this big order of knights that are doing things. There's the Knights of the Sword in Spain, Reconquista. You have the Knights Templar, that's generally French, and actually English as well, because at that period, France and England basically indistinguishable. You then have, there was actually a group of knights who were all lepers as well. They were, I can't remember the name of their order, but it was green background, white cross. Field, sorry, not background, use the correct terms. But you have these things that people still reference to these days. You see it in, say, right-wing politics a lot now, where people reference the Knights Templar and the Crusades. Yet that's partly because it's the establishment of the country and the religious identity, as well as the physical identity of the country. Prussia is very much formed, as you said, from knightly orders. It's a country that wasn't formed and then the knightly order got connected. It's kind of formed from that thing happening. So you end up with this very militaristic attitude, and that then delves further into this Prussian psyche that is developing,
right,
that then ends up taking over Germany. So now if we fast forward through all of those things that we've talked about, we get back to World War II. The generals, a lot of them were Prussian. World War One, again, a lot of the generals were Prussian. This Prussian military aristocracy, because that was their thing. They were to be an aristocrat. You had to have this military identity. You also had to be an upright person. This comes from this whole Teutonic idea. The aspects of Nazism that hark back to the Teutonic Order, this whole sort of big, or the Teutons are the correct thing. This is because the Prussians are the Germans, essentially. This is the last really. I keep going on about this, especially when we talk about horse archers. These waves of people come out the Caucasus, and everyone kind of gets pushed to the Atlantic seaboard, and they get pushed over. This is the last time that this really happens. Of this,
Right.
push for something west. Of the Prussians become the Germans, which means they're pushed west, which means they own that bit, which is after. Well, could you get a map of the German territory in 1921?
Yeah, I think I could. Give me a moment.
Yeah, if you could, because this will
could.
explain this next point.
Let's see. We got a map. Trying to look for a good map here. Yeah, I think we got one here. All right. Yeah. Give me a moment. Okay, I think I got something here. Share the screen. Yeah, I think this is going to be good. All right. This is from 1923 to 1939. So this is Poland.
Oh, that's better than I even hoped.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
All right, so here's the deal. You got Prussia here, Poland in the middle. This is the free city of Danzig, the free city of
the whole Danzig, Danzig corridor.
And then here, and then where my mouse is, you got East Prussia, and then Lithuania in the distance.
So what we're looking at here is you go right the way back to that whole 1500s thing. This East Prussia, that's Prussia.
Yes.
That's where Prussia was. So Danzig was also part of that, and obviously, as is quite clearly shown, and as Angel has pointed out to us, Prussia's also on the other side.
You got Western Prussia.
Yeah, it's again another podcast we'll have to do at some point about the US restructuring.
You know what this map, Aiden? You know what this map reminds me of? Medieval 2 Total War, the Teutonic campaign. It's the same exact kind of map because you start off the east part. This is like the Teutonic Order, and then you got conquer Poland. Then you got to go to Lithuania, and then try to go into Novgorod. You know, the Kingdom of Novgorod in Russia.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a power. I don't know if a power is the correct name, but it's kind of a power now. So how history was back in the 1500s, and then 400 years later, here we are again. We're back to the same thing 400 years later.
Exactly. One of the other things that I found quite interesting is I was trying to find out where, from the series Vikings, Kattegat is, which is obviously a prominent place. Now, that's here. That's where this is. This is Viking territory. Now, as we keep saying, it's like Prussia, Russia, very similar. Rus, the Rus. That is the link to the Vikings here. These people were originally the Vikings, which is there's no accident that this coast here is where they settled. Now, this goes also back to what we were talking about Wales, about hard country to conquer. Look at the southern border of that. Who wants to fight over that many goddamn lakes? Like, they're lucky they got over that river in the north. Like, it's, and then when they did, they had to stop at the other one. It's the natural borders. You've got a little bit of space on the east there, but the natural borders really do define where the original territories of people would be, because in the modern world we can work out a way of getting over those things. They're not so important, but actually in the past they were major things. You think you've got the Vikings are seafarers, so rivers, awesome. So they can threaten sort of north of a river even if they don't take it. That's why that line's hashed. up there in the north, or that's an area that's disputed, because that's what they were trying to do. You've got all of this territory that's created all around the Baltic from these. This map is awesome, and this map is after World War One. This is the result of Germany losing because the Prussian aristocracy made massive mistakes. I've got a book on it somewhere. It's called Why the Germans Lose at War. Fantastic book to read. It's absolutely brilliant. Germans incredibly good at war, very not good at winning them.
Yeah, that's the thing.
They're very good at doing them. So this all comes from this whole Prussian aristocracy thing. But this, essentially, if you look at East Prussia, that's a medieval kingdom there that you've got. There's a whole ethos that grows out of one of those things. And Lithuania was not a slouch in those times either. And this goes to the Hanseatic League again, a thing that we'll briefly touch on, but that's gonna be about 5 episodes, the Hanseatic League. But essentially, what you're looking at here is a regional Prussia. I mean, it went across Danzig corridor into where it also says Prussia on the map, but that's it. That's what we're talking about here.
Yeah,
this little bit of land and the influence it had. It's insane.
Yeah, it is. Let me see. I found something else that's interesting as well. Let me share the screen. It's maybe not as important, but it's a very cool snippet I found. Prussian stamps.
Oh wow, they're really cool.
Yeah, Prussian stamps. I mean, maybe not too important about what we're talking about, but I might add in these new tidbits of information, these little tidbits of make things a little interesting. Yeah, the stamps of so you got 5, 10, 15 different denominations depending on what you were sending.
So you say it's not that important. This is actually really, really important, because think when stamps came around, it's like the penny black is often called one of the first stamps. There's probably another stamp that was first, but that's one of the first most prominent ones that we had. That thing goes for a lot of money, but that's really late in history. To have an influence and have somewhere where you can do that late in history, at the point of where you're having stamps, is quite an impact of the area. So we're not talking about ancient history here. We're talking about something relatively recent.
Exactly.
You talk to a grandparent who talked to their grandparent to find out about things. But I talked to one of my grandmothers, and she talked to her grandfather, and he fought in the Russian Civil War in Siberia. That's weird. You don't think you're that connected, but it takes talking to one person who knew another person. This is in that time period of things that happened, and this is definitely going to the art references here. This is you're talking Art Deco here. This is Art Deco. Where do you think Art Deco came from? The Prussians. That's where that lot came from. And this goes to the US as well. That this stylistic influence that you get here, and it's changed. So I can go really deep in this with the way they did swells. 5 go right the way back to this Viking connection as well. The cultural, so swells and stamps. Not stamps like this, but stamps like a stamp that you hit into something to make a thing. That swirl pattern goes right the way back. That the Celts were using it as well as one of the ways of identifying Celtic things within Roman assemblages. However, you can see those historical influences in there. Look at the borders on them. Like you've got that Book of Kells idea of, so there's historical manuscripts from the church as well. It's like there's a deep cultural history that comes from there, And then you go for that Art Deco idea, and that Art Deco comes out of somewhere, and it's this kind of stylistic stuff. And then you look at the US in the 20s when you lot were building all those fantastic tall buildings and all of the lifts, those old hotels that always end up in horror films now, but the look of those hotels, is this style. It came from somewhere. So these people have moved because obviously the US is significantly German. But it's actually very little English in the US. If you really look into it, it's more German than US. This stylistic influence is very impactful on that from an art history perspective as well. It's like, and this is what I'm saying. It's like the Prussia doesn't exist, but it does everywhere. Everything you look at, you can just point out and go, well, Prussia did that bit, and then, well, cool, that was clearly connected to Prussia. And this is the thing, is that those steps. No, that was a fantastic find, Angel. That was a really fantastic find. It's that's the type of thing that shows how a culture and country still exists later on. Stamps. Anyone's ever interested in cultural stuff with stamps? It's there's a specific term for stamps. Go look at the Royal Mail. I presume has a website before they set it off. There's a whole political thing going on there, but it's still going on. They show you the stuff that they have produced, and stamps are a way of showing what you're proud of in your country. It's like what you have in your banknotes or what you have in your coins, and that goes back to Rome. That's how they disseminated. We won this battle. One of the famous ones, obviously, is with Octavian when he won. The coins from that were how the empire knew that they actually had an empire, because of that type of thing. So having stamps is a massive cultural impact. It's like, I don't think people quite realise how important stamps actually are in a country's history.
Now, there's something else I want to go into. World War II, when the Nazis, they tried to invade Russia at one point, and there's another parallel to that when Germany and Russia went to war. You remember the 7 Years' War back in the mid 1700s? The 7 Years' War.
Pretty, that one. That was a little bit violent. That one. Well, as far as wars go, that's considered a violent one. Yeah.
Basically, the 7 Years' War was a war between Prussia and Great Britain on one side, Austria, France, Sweden, and Russia on the other. So basically, they went to war together, and it's a good power now because they fought each other in the 1700s, only to fight each other in the 1900s. Once again, the Russian bear against Nazi Germany. Although there was still the Prussian influence even in the World War II.
Yeah, it's that Prussian general influence was Valkyrie. I don't know if people have watched the film. It takes some liberties, and it is an actor I absolutely despise. But that's the thing. It's those Prussian generals are like, we're not prosecuting the war in such a way that a Prussian general would do. We want to remove you and actually have this as a proper war with honor. It's that honor system that people often see amongst Nazi officers that came from Prussia. That was a Prussian influence, and there was a lot of their heavy influence in there as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you said about the 7 Years' War as well.
Right.
It's like one of the noticeable things is how many times on these conflicts has England been on the side of the Germans?
Yeah,
it was. We were allied to the Germans in 1913.
Yes.
So think about that for a few seconds.
Yes.
1913, we're allied to. It's only 1914 that broke that, and then we kind of repaired that relationship, sort of, with after the war reconstructing Germany and things like that, but it's never truly been the same. It's kind of like the whole Britain-France relationship type of thing, We switched from being against France to being against Germany, but it was really late on, and people forget how late that was as
Right.
well. And this goes back to talking to a grandparent who's talked to their grandparent who lived through it, and it's not that difficult to do.
Yeah. And it's another fun fact. Today, the question is, do ethnic Prussians still exist? And they say today, the single officially registered ethnic Balkan Prussian community exists in Lithuania.
That's really interesting, actually. I didn't
Yes.
know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. Yeah. So apparently, Prussians are still a thing, although it's really limited to Lithuania, and that's about it. So it's definitely not as big as it used to be, but it's still a thing. It's still a thing, I guess, even in today's modern world.
So I wonder if that's so on that map that we saw earlier, that striped area of Russia. I
Uh-huh.
wonder if that's a bit of a hot hub for them, because
Yeah.
that's Lithuania. So around
Yes.
that river is where they are. It's keeping those traditions alive of we are these people, this type of populace we'd like to keep alive and our traditions alive. And it's this actually goes to what you were saying
Uh-huh.
about Cossacks, why they didn't
Right.
have a special unit, because everyone looked to the Prussians, because the Prussians were the best. They set how a military march should do. They set how you put your units out. They set how you did battle. They set how uniforms were even made. Like everyone emulated them. For so
Right.
many years, they became just a default standard. So you can't identify that it's Prussian per se, but that's because everyone did it, because they did that the best at that period in time. So everyone took this on. Do go back to that Napoleonic picture right at the beginning that we showed of that. That's you look at that. That's the stereotypical picture of a late 1700 soldier.
Uh-huh. Right.
That's what we think of, because that's how the Prussians did it.
Yeah.
So everyone else did it. Like
Oh,
it's like,
even.
and this goes to the Hollywood thing that I was
Yeah.
saying about. That Hollywood does it, so everyone else does it.
I actually found something even better. I found a better map from 1922.
Oh,
This is an even better map.
oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. That
this is
really
more
shows.
expansive. So you got Poland, Lithuania, Prussia. You got Brandenburg down here. You got the Czech Republic, France, the Netherlands, and Denmark. And then Mecklenburg. You had a little part right in that green section north of Prussia, Mecklenburg. That used to be an independent state as well.
So this goes deep into why World War One started. So Germany was formed by a group of Germans signing a treaty at Versailles to form Germany. Now, Treaty of Versailles may be a thing you recognise as the
Yes.
treaty at the end of World War One.
Yes.
The reason that it was done the same was it was an insult to Germany, and Germany was formed out of lots of very independent states. Germany is the closest European country to the US in the form of a bunch of states with a federal over government. Well, it's the Federal Bundesrepublik Germany, or something along those lines. Anyway, but it's federal. It's a federal government with a bunch of states. So in that map where you put out Magdeburg, that's a strong state that has kept its identity. It has fought against it being erased and made part of that thing. Think Texans in the US. It's that kind of ethos that's going on with that. That in the First World War, you're talking 30 years after the state was formed. Like, this is like 18 06 for the US, or our country's weird with that, so let's ignore that, because it's actually technically also 18 something as well if you do that in, because it was 1700 that our country was formed. But it's the 1800s where all these states are being formed properly, and the people have this knowledge of them not being full states beforehand, that they created these states. So you get this bit, and that map that you put up shows how Germany was wide but didn't go very far south. This starts to explain everything that went on with Hitler. So the Anschluss in Austria, the invasion of Czechoslovakia, as it was at the time,
Right.
the taking of all these territories that are actually German territories and trying to reform Germany as it was before those periods, and how far it was deconstructed. So it just goes to show that you've still got this idea of, we've tried to form an identity and you guys have tried to stop this. And then that's led into a politician going, let's reform this identity, and then doing horrendous things to try and do that, which is, obviously we don't do politics on this show, but it's
Right.
it shows how that happens, that it's not an isolated thing. There's always a reason behind it. There's always they're looking back to a certain period where they liked a thing, and that thing was better, so they wanted that, and now they want that now, and they try and reform that into that thing, but often obviously it goes awry and gets entirely horrendous. Like, for example, this, as we're talking about, this whole big Prussian kingdom that comes out of the Napoleonic era is a loose confederation of states. You have the Confederation of the Rhine as well during the Napoleonic era. It's a loose grouping of states that do a thing together. You have Brandenburg, which is a major influence. You then have Prussia, which is obviously a huge influence. You then get into, well, you even get into Silesia and various other places with the Napoleonic history. But the end of that, end of the 1800s, all of that then culminates in this Germany forming out of what the Prussians have done trying to form this country, which then feeds into the later history, because we think of things like World War II and World War One and the Cold War as isolated incidents, and they're big, and they're not as, they're different to other things. They're different because of the way they fought. They're not different because of what they are. It's the people fighting in those, they had, like I keep saying, is you talk to your grandparent about what their grandparent did. If that grandparent's grandparent didn't live in the country you call that name, that country is really new. So it's still subject to change because you've had to do a lot to make that thing. Prussia's weird in the fact that it's not war that made it. It's that they brought those people together. It was the outside influence. It was Napoleon coming in. You had Brunswick, the Duke of Brunswick, is the whole black uniforms with death's heads. Yeah, Brunswick. That was their thing that was taken up by the Germans. This is another hit back from the Nazis to show how they had this Germanic thing, but the Brunswickers weren't Germans. You've got this whole massive connection, but it wasn't that. Or even the Uhlans the Germans used, which was kind of goddamn ironic when it was the Nazis, because Uhlans are Polish. So, that's a whole thing. But it's the melding of this history is Prussia is, while it's this weird thing that happens with a knightly order that isn't in Germany anymore, really. It's Poland, Lithuania now. It's
Mhm.
those areas. It's formed by this, but those people had that massive influence upon that. It's kind of like Normandy is to the UK. UK wouldn't be what it is without Normandy. But Normandy is not part of the UK, it's part of France. Germany wouldn't be Germany without Prussia, but Prussia's not part of Germany.
Right.
It's that type of thing. Yeah.
So a couple of fun facts before we get to the end of the podcast. Two popular characters in history came from Prussia. Otto von Bismarck. You remember him? Otto von
He's the
Bismarck.
guy, yeah. Yeah, he's the guy who made Germany. He
Yeah,
literally made Germany.
yeah, but he was a Prussian native.
Yeah.
He was the one. He was the one who oversaw the unification of Germany in 1871. So
Yeah.
he became the prime minister. So now the Germans credit Otto von Bismarck for putting Germany together the way it is today, for unifying it. And he also came up with the popular "blood and steel" mantra. Yep, blood and
Yes.
steel.
Which, like everything we said all through this episode, is
Yep.
there is an aristocratic military bent to
Hmm.
the Prussians. And Otto von Bismarck personified that. He is, if you want to know anything about Prussians, just look at him. He
Right.
is the Prussian. He's everything you need to know about Prussia.
Yep. Exactly. It's
Yeah.
in fact, if you play Civilization 3, he's the leader of the Germans,
Hmm.
Otto von Bismarck, which makes sense. And he's been I think he's been the from Civilization 3 to Civilization 6. He's been the leader of the Germans. He's been the popular character because Civilization, they like to pick characters from the different the most popular character, like Gandhi for the Indians, Caesar for the Romans, and all that.
We got Elizabeth II, and you guys got Abraham Lincoln, I believe.
Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Mhm.
So like these big prominent figures who
Yeah.
unified a country. Yeah,
And,
we're not saying
and
they didn't have issues, but they
and
unified a
it's
country.
crazy because Germany is a very old country. You could have picked anybody from German history, but you picked Otto von Bismarck is the biggest. It's the most recognized in German history. It takes a lot to do that, considering Germany is much older than the United States.
If you consider something like Arminius as well, Arminius
Right,
is really that first attempt to unify the Germans
right.
into a specific state, and it takes all the way up until 1871 for
Yeah,
Bismarck to come along.
Otto von Bismarck finished it. He finished the job.
Yeah.
And there's another character. This one is definitely a lot more controversial. Believe me. I don't know if you know where I'm going with this, but it's a very controversial character in history from Prussia, Marxism, and I'm sure you
Mm.
know who invented Marxism, right? Karl
Yeah,
Marx.
clues in the name. Yeah,
Yep.
this is the other thing that people forget, that Prussia, there's a Germany connection. There's a very strong German connection. There's also this strong
Uh,
Russian connection.
yeah, the communism,
Like as I
the
said with the
communism
Kaliningrad
connection.
Oblast, and his when you have an advanced society, the whole point of society is the you go right the way back to hunter-gatherer society, moving into agriculture. The whole point of that is that allows you then to have people who don't have to go out and do farming. They can just get the food, so they can do other things. This goes all the way through to like the 1800s, where agriculture, because of the Industrial Revolution, stops being the major thing as well. So that expanse of what is the middle class, not the US middle class. The US middle class is a completely different concept. Um, the expanse of the middle class creates thinkers. Marx, was Marx middle or upper? He was not a working class lad, was he? He
Hmm.
was. He was a guy who saw things like, yeah, we're not doing this right. So he came up with his ideas in this book, but that's because he had the time to write. That shows how Prussia had pushed through that. And when you're getting these major political ideas coming out early on in that time period that are, well, yeah, they're connected to obviously the ancient ones, but when you get them coming out of that period, it shows how advanced those areas are. They're areas of critical thinking where you get a critical mass of people together who are discussing these topics and feel it's comfortable to bring up these world-changing ideas. Hence why we get ourselves a Karl Marx in there. So Karl Marx buried in Paris. Is he the one that's buried in Paris? I know there's one of the famous foremost communists buried in Paris. So I remember not being able to get into that cemetery to have a look because it was closed on a walk past. But
the Marxism, the connection between that and Russia was that Marxism led to Vladimir Lenin, who brought communism Russia. He gave birth to the Bolshevik Revolution. So that's what.
But Marxism being the core idea,
right?
That then devolves. I say devolves. That's pretty insulting. Evolves. That's a politer way to put it. Into Bolshevism. Bolshevism then evolves into Stalinism. Yeah, and then you end up with communism and that thing that they could never fix. We're proto-communists over here in the 1600s. The levelers were proto-communists. There was a whole massive group of them in Essex. But this idea of you need a leader type of thing. But when you think of how we've talked about Prussia, of militaristic state with specific leaders who do specific things and type of thing, that kind of aristocracy is about honor, and coming out of something like the Crusades era orders, you're looking at someone who's not in an environment where they're going to come up with those ideas easily, which means the society has to be advanced enough to do that. And Prussia was. And this is the thing, I find it weird that Prussia isn't a country. Like, Prussia should be a country, Germany shouldn't be. It's like Germany's a weird amalgamation of a bunch of different places. But Prussia should be, partly because of these types of things, that it was so solidified, that they were so advanced that they had this thinker who came up with this idea. Whether we agree with what he came up with or not, it is immaterial. The fact that he could do that is the important point. Yeah. Anyway, have you got any more? You got any more of these Prussian thinkers?
Nah, unfortunately not. And in fact, we have actually reached the end of the show. We are over the hour. Yeah, we have crossed the 1 hour mark. So yeah, very interesting topic, and we managed to cover a lot. But yeah, no more for now. Yes, because we have reached the end of the show. But so with that, I'd like to thank everyone who watched. I'd like to thank Nee for joining us and watching from the distance. And we're gonna figure out what the next topic is for our next show in 2 weeks. That will be January the 18th. Will be our next show. So I hope you come on and join us. And if you didn't get to see us today, the replay will be up as soon as we go off here. You'll be able to see it from the beginning. So, and of course, check us out on YouTube on the Book Asylum, where you can check out our previous videos, our previous topics, and you can also check out book reviews, horror book reviews, and other cool stuff. So go to the Book Asylum YouTube channel. Please like, subscribe, and comment. But until then.
Days of content on there. You could lose yourself in the content.
Oh, for sure. We go into a lot of good stuff. The Vikings, the Bactrians, we go into a lot of stuff. So we got to think about our next topic, but we got a couple of weeks to think about that. But thank you for watching, guys. So, that has been my man, the Gate, Aiden Collier. I have been Satoria Natchez Maximus. Thank you for watching the first episode of 2025 of the Age of Warfare podcast. We look forward to bringing you more educational and entertaining content throughout the rest of the year. So this is just the beginning of the year. Thank you for joining us. And until then, guys, take it easy. Bye-bye.
Take care, guys.
Take care.